Yo, yo. Wait, you're on the other side of the bed. I can't sleep like this. I can't hear you either. Michael, you know that I like
the video to stop playing on my end. That's all. There we
go.
No,
you're on the. I like the right side. You're on the left side. Yeah. I can't sleep like this. You know that, right?
Yeah. I can. We can swap.
Oh, okay, fine. Thank you. It's just that we've been sleeping like that for years now, and I'm used to it. You know what I mean?
Well, it all depends on what side the dog gets on. That's the problem. Is
dog? Damn, you want to go all the way to beast? Anyway, so anyway, straight from homosexuality to bestiality. Like you don't even pause. You just like straight up. Let's just go.
The slippery slope. As they call it.
It's amazing. Yeah. So listen, we have to talk about this show, and there's a controversy that's been not brewing; it's been overflowing for months now. Some people they come to us to learn about the world. Okay. And some people come to us and want to learn about the culture. And so we have to, and some people say, listen, 25 minutes talking about like whatever Black people are doing this week, get to the geopolitics. So how about this? Let's come up with a rule. Okay. It's 5 minutes. We get to talk about music, sports, whatever the latest rapper is doing. And then we got to go. Okay. To the serious politics that really matter. How do you feel about that?
No, I think there's a right and wrong way of doing it. I think people were a little annoyed last week because there was the whole thermonuclear war thing looming over everybody's head, and
whatever.
Yeah, and the conversation about where art is, or just like how do you not let your politics get in your way of art, is a good broader conversation to have. On the eve of Thanksgiving, I think it's good to reflect on what's it going to be like to go back to your families and see somebody who may not agree with you, and realize what their whole universe was like for the last year. And should we get together on this blessed holiday? Should we celebrate colonialism like we do every year? And should we make peace with our family? Or should we argue about dead kids and argue about the concentration camps Trump is going to build?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say to the people is who are dealing with this question of what to do on Thanksgiving is fuck your family. Just fuck them. Just no. Like do what's his face? Stefan Molyneux. And where did he go, by the way?
Oh, Stefan. Oh, he got rich off of Bitcoin. He's been shilling Bitcoin for like the last.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that what he does now?
He does like a radio talk, like personal issues. Like it's almost like a love line, the Stefan Molyneux love line, and he just shills Bitcoin. But
imagine getting romantic advice from Stefan Molyneux.
Yeah.
It amazes me. These guys, or what's his face? Roland. No, Rollo Tomasi, that guy. Like,
yeah.
I follow him because it's just the highest comedy that he's giving advice about how to have sex with women. Where were we? It was something much more important.
Your family, defoo.
So defooing, Stefan Molyneux introduced this concept, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago when he was on The Ascendant. I mentioned him because I was on his show and I had to destroy him in a debate on postmodernism, which, by the way, I recommend that one if you want to know my thoughts, my feelings, and my feelings and my thoughts on postmodernism. Go check that one out. We talk about whether he was really insistent on, he really needed to know whether a tree could give birth to a baby. I think that was what that centered around. But anyway, he did say something that I think is essential, not just interesting and intelligent, but essential, that we should all follow. And he said this again when he was building his cult. He called it defooing, which I never. Do you know why it's called defooing?
No, I don't know the origin of that.
Anyway, the concept of
yeah.
is, if your family disagrees with you about politics, never talk to them again.
Yeah, well, this is like some real esoteric ANCAP stuff. The idea was like
ANCAP, what is that? Remember that? So ANCAP is this thing. This is a cult that Michael used to belong to. Do you want to tell him about it?
Yeah. For some reason, I don't know why.
Anarcho-capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
This is a general education podcast where you're not people. Okay, so anarcho-capitalism is an exotic and radical strain of libertarianism that emerged 30 years ago. Its adherents love a particular Jew named Murray Rothbard, which is odd since Michael is anti-Semitic. But anyway, there are contradictions within it. They believe that there should be no rules in society and we should be able to do whatever we want. Is that fair?
It's complicated. It's basically depends.
I'm going to be serious in a minute, I promise.
Yeah.
Stefan Molyneux, I think most viewers, not all, but most viewers probably know who he is and what anarcho-capitalism is. But I know there really are many people here who are for the Palestine talk, and they won't know. So anyway, you were a part of this
political ideology. For some reason, this political ideology, their colors are black and yellow.
Weird. It never caught on.
Weird.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, actually, to riff yet again, the black and yellow people, the radical libertarians, not me. That's more of a burnt mustard color in the Unregistered logo. I just want everyone to know it's not yellow, and it's not that's my greatest regret about picking my color scheme 8 years ago, which before I even knew what the fucking, who cares about these weirdo libertarians. It is a little similar, but it's a mustard. It's not a yellow.
Okay.
Anyway, I mean like a deli mustard, like a hot one, brown.
We don't wash our flag. They wash their flags. We don't wash ours.
Yeah, it's brown. It's not yellow. Okay, Stefan Molyneux, even though he was the leader of a cult you belong to that has very weird ideas that is exotic and the American people have shunned repeatedly since its inception, nonetheless had an excellent point that you should never talk to your family members who disagree with you. Now, extend, hold on.
Okay.
Just hold on. Extend the idea of disagreeing to annoying you or irritating you. Family members who disagree with you politically or annoy you or irritating, or how about this? And this is the thing I want everyone to consider when they're sitting at the table tomorrow night. Do these people give you anything? Maybe they do. Some family members do. But look at them, each one, look them in the face and think to yourself, does that person right there give me anything in my life that is valuable? And if the answer is no, you know what to do. It's time for some defooing. But don't you think the gays gave us the right idea about this? The concept of the chosen family. We choose our family because gays used to have to do that before they were forcibly indoctrinated into American mainstream culture and made to vote for Democrats. Remember that time when the gays were exotic and weird and out there, kind of like ANCAPs, and they weren't allowed to integrate? And they said, oh, because no one will be, and they were getting thrown out of their families, which often happened. They said, and this was a very important LGBTQ contribution to our society, they said, we have to choose our families, and we do. We choose our families, meaning friends, who become so close they may as well be family. And it turns out, the gays said and showed us, they're way better than your family. The family you're born into can't be as good as the family you choose, you curate over time among people you know. Don't you think we should just, on Thanksgiving, we should just hang out with gay people and let them tell us what to do? Because that's the right thing, is to be with the people we know as conscious adult human beings we want to hang out with, not just the person who happens to share some DNA. Sorry, Michael. Over to you.
Looking from Foo, F-O-O. This is in the chat. Foo means family of origin. To defoo means to discard your birth family and select a new family.
Oh my God, we got some deep Ancapists here. We got some Mullen. Were you in the Mullen? Who is this? Were you in the Mullen cult, gentlemen?
Bill Fenner,
sir, Bill Fenner. Yes, you were. Did you take the Mecca, the pilgrimage to Stefan's house in Toronto? My good friend Todd. Should I out Todd? I think I can. Yeah, Todd Schrammke. He made the Anarchists documentary film on HBO. Came out last year, in which I was a prominent character, and that's a good word to use. Anyway, Todd began his adult life as a member of the Stefan Molyneux cult, and did in fact travel from his home in New Jersey, his parents' home. I think he was a teenager at the time. Saved up money, selling, I think, newspapers, and got on a train to Toronto, and then ended up living at Stefan Molyneux's house for a time among the cults. It's a cult. Anyway, you were saying.
So I mean, in general, I'm in favor of staying with your family, and you use the word cult kind of lightly or like sarcastically, but like the defooing thing was the thing that characterized
I know
Molyneux's following as a cult following,
right?
And
because that is characteristic of most cults historically, that they require that, right? Okay.
And I mean, I was gonna, as you were bringing up the gay thing, I was gonna bring up some lesbian domestic violence statistics.
This is a family show.
Yeah. Okay.
This is not about gore. Okay. This is not a horror movie. All right. You talk lesbian domestic violence. Yeah. We don't go that far.
Okay.
Okay. That's just like gross. You know what I mean? Like the screen is red. I mean, the lens is covered in blood, so you can't even see through it. That's how nasty those movies are. Lesbian domestic violence. Do you know how hard they can punch?
Yeah. Hard enough.
You ever sparred with one? I have.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. A couple of them actually. No, they're amazing. They're awesome fighters. All right, tell us about that. How bad is it?
Well, okay. Aside from that, I want more context on the defooing thing. Molyneux did this, like, the least charitable interpretation of it is the completely politically ideological one, which is I disagree with you politically. I'm an anarchist. You support the state.
Right.
Because you support the state. You support police officers kidnapping me and throwing me in jail if I don't pay my taxes or if I smoke joints.
You called it the anarchist point of view. It's not. It's actually the autistic point of view. But continue. Right.
Yeah. So
the binary thing. I've been watching Destiny a lot. Unfortunately, debate people recently.
The black stripper.
I wish. Yeah. I really wish. No, the streamer, is that what y'all call that shit? Anyway, he's been trying to. He's actually started debating serious people like Glenn Greenwald and Ryan Grimm, so I had to watch it anyway. And Glenn Greenwald at one point said, "You're the most binary thinking person I've ever talked to." I mean, it's autistic thinking. I'm not saying he's necessarily autistic or it should be medicalized, but there's a way of thinking, not a medical condition, but a way of thinking that is utterly binary like that.
So that's the least charitable interpretation of what Molyneux was putting out.
Right.
The most charitable interpretation is he would take responsibility for his political ideology, and he would say, I'm an anarchist because I opposed violence. The state is the monopoly on violence. If we are to make the world a more peaceful place, we need to start where we have control, and we need to look into the origin of violence. And the number one origin of violence is violent parenting, is when parents hit their kids, they create the cycle of violence. They teach their kids that that's how you interact with people. They justify violence in the world, and they desensitize a child to a violent world, and they make them think that that's correct and that's how you should deal with people. And statistically, somebody who is hit as a child for discipline or for any reason is more likely to engage in criminal behavior or be more violent in the future. So what Stefan Molyneux wanted you to do was to confront your parents who spanked you and say, hey, I really didn't appreciate that. I'd like to stop that. And I'd really appreciate an apology. And if they don't apologize to you for that, then they don't care about you. And you should recognize that they don't care about you and move on. And there are a lot of people who followed Molyneux's advice and got the apology that they always wanted, actually. And so, yeah, which a lot of people don't report on. You only report on the stuff going wrong. So I think the message is have that hard conversation while you have the chance to, and resolve those issues. And if Thanksgiving dinner, the one time out of the year that you actually see these people, is your only opportunity, seize it, because you don't see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating theory of causation. It's a massive theory. It's almost a cosmic theory. It explains, or attempts to explain, sort of the grand arc of human history. Why wars have happened, right? Like why not just wars, but sort of mass aggression has happened among people, right? That's well, let's think about that. And he's saying that it begins, the origin of it, of statist war, I suppose. Statist violence is in the home between the parent and the child. Corporal punishment results in mass murder in the name of a nation state. Okay. So and this is why everyone should study history. If you want to win an argument, just study history. Here you go. Here's how it goes. So look at fucking history. Just take a broad sweep. Think about violence, mass violence, and wars. Just numerically, quantitatively, qualitatively. The way people have died in these wars, the methods of killing them and all that stuff. How many have died? Okay. And this is a shout out to Steven Pinker too. So this goes out to the libertarian idiots and to the liberal idiots both. Steven Pinker has written books and built much of his fame on the claim that world got less violent. The world got less violent over time, and especially under modernity has been less violent than in pre-modern times, which is what Stefan Molyneux needs too, right? Because hitting your kid, beating the living shit out of your kid with implements, sticks and knives, and not knives, sometimes knives, belts, giant poles. I mean, I talk about this in my book, in Renegade History, about how American children got the shit beaten out of them until when? Yeah. Until the 20th century.
And in your book, this is comparing the life of 19th century white people in polite society against the slaves who were beaten allegedly on the plantation.
There's no question, and I bring a lot of evidence to bear, quantitative, numerical evidence, by the way, in my book, second chapter. It's just not even almost debatable, really, I think, if you look at the evidence, that slaves were beaten and physically punished far less often than white children were in the 19th century. 18th and 19th centuries, until the abolition of slavery. Is not even any question about it. I mean, beaten by their masters, beaten by other slaves, that's a different story, but beaten by their masters far, far less. I mean, so we know this, it was about once per year per slave in the Deep South. Kids, white, American, free children, many of them were beaten every single day. And I'm talking about in incredibly cruel ways. Again, with implements, with, bats and sticks and rods, and they were hung from ceilings. Quaker schools, that's how Quaker schools in Pennsylvania disciplined students in their schools. They hung them in burlap sacks from the ceiling until they stopped talking or whatever it was. Bring us back. we were coming. No, where were we? My digressions, man.
So does the hypothesis that violence in the home leads to violence in society?
Molyneux's thesis. So there it is. So the campaign against corporal punishment begins in the 19th century, actually, in the 1830s, 40s, with the abolitionists as part of their big pre-progressive campaign. Culminates early 20th century, or I should say begins. It becomes a sort of identifiable political campaign in the early 20th century to reform the schools, to remove corporal punishment from the school and the home. But like most things today that we now experience, it was really established as a norm to not hit your kids with World War II. And that's a longer story. But in the 50s and 60s and 70s, with the advent of Dr. Spock, all these new sort of professional modern parenting advice books and experts were coming out, all of them saying, stop hitting your kids. They banned corporal punishment in the schools before World War II, but the norm is more important. And that really took hold in the 50s and 60s, right around the time when I was born. So the 20th century is the century in which fewer children were beaten in the home than any other century. Well, let's look at wars in the 20th century. I mean, it's the bloodiest, most lethal century in human history, and it's not close at all. Just the world wars alone account for, what is it now, 90 million people dead just from those two. 65 million in World War II. What is the current number on World War I? They always grow as we do more research, but maybe close to 100 million between the two. That's just those two. My gosh. So no, I'm sorry. I'd like for that to be the theory. I don't like hitting kids and I don't like war. In fact, I hate both. But it doesn't work.
So we have to beat the kids here to avoid having to beat them out there.
It looks that way if you look at the sweep of history. Actually, it might be true. And this is, I wonder if this will ever get into the MAGA versus liberal culture war. Because I'll bet you anything that the MAGA people, generally speaking, are more likely to not hit their kids, but use corporal punishment as legitimate punishment, or see it as legitimate punishment, a spanking, which is what most of them do. They're mostly not sadists. I hate hitting. I never hit my son ever. Never would. Couldn't imagine doing it. It's very much constitutionally anathema to me. But that's because I was raised in a feminist, lefty, bougie family. I don't in the mid 20th century. Look at black households. Here we go. I got us back to the black people. Mm-hmm. Look at African Americans and their cultural norms around child rearing and discipline and etc.
Well, Obama famously, whenever he speaks at the NAACP, Barack Obama always says, and make sure you got to hit those kids. Beat your kids. That's the direct quote, I'm pretty sure.
They beat the shit out of their kids.
Yeah.
Don't even start to challenge me on this, because I was raised in part by a black family when I was between the ages of 3 and 8. I was in a daycare with the Robinson family in Oakland. My dad left me there for much of the day during this year after the divorce. And yes, I've seen it, but it's just known. We know this. I mean, surveys have been done. If you want to go all the way up there, many surveys have been done showing that African Americans have a totally different view of corporal punishment than white people do. Yeah. But they might be right, is the point. Here's the thing. Once again, black people, we consider these norms of theirs, these behaviors of them to be, oh my God, abhorrent and barbaric. And of course, we don't want to be like them. And then we find out that dancing's actually better than not dancing. And hitting your kids is better than not hitting your kids. So there you go. No, I mean it. Like, I don't understand the norm against corporal punishment. It actually, even though I'm constitutionally, I hate it, my mind tells me something else, that it's not necessarily, in fact, it might be a better thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. And but their connection to war makes no. I see none, actually, which might be the most important. Molyneux and others, even who argue against him, want there to be some kind of causal connection between what we do to our kids and how many wars we're in. And that's what I want to disconnect. I don't actually see that. I think they're separate and different, and they just should not be compared. And there's no causal connection between the two. If you hit your kid, I mean, have black Americans gone to war a lot in the last couple of hundred years? No, they're the least war-making people in terms of organized state war. No, they don't do that. That's the last thing they do. Who's done the war? American Protestant liberals who don't hit their kids.
Yeah. I was watching the Showtime series about George Jones and Tammy Wynette, and raw household, crazy, stories between them. But they always come back to, if we're fighting, we're talking, And
redneck therapy.
Yeah, redneck therapy. They would always come back to each other and say, well, it's a good thing we're fighting, even though it looks crazy, because if we're fighting, we're talking. And if we're not fighting, that means that we're separated and things are getting even worse between us. So I would say, if you really hate your family, show up to Thanksgiving and beat the shit out of them in person. Do them the honor, I guess.
But don't kill them?
But don't kill them.
That's where you draw the line, But I'm thinking of, have you ever seen The Wonderful Whites of West Virginia?
No.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My friend Julian Nitzberg, great movie, great film, documentary. What's it called? Wonderful, The Whites of West Virginia. That's got a long title. It's on Netflix. Go watch it immediately. It's amazing. He spent like a year. He's a nerdy Jewish guy from New York City, and he just spent a year with this incredibly crazy redneck hillbilly family in West Virginia. And it's just nonstop violence. Yeah. Of all kinds, like from, the slap against the face if you said something the other person didn't like, your girlfriend or your wife didn't like, to killing, to stabbings and shootings and dumping bodies in rivers, which is J.D. Vance's whole thing also about how the, white rednecks are just as bad as the blacks, which is a good anti-racist move, by the way. J.D. Vance made one of the greatest, maybe accidentally, did he ever make this point explicitly, that whites are just as bad when they're poor as black people are. It's a great anti-racist move.
Yeah, he didn't really explain that, but I guess to liberals, the only way you can humanize white people to liberals, I guess, is to compare their circumstances to that of black people. But true. Yeah. Whoa, they're just like these other things that I consider. Wow, poor whites.
We are just like black people. God, I loved Obama. All right, man, let's do it. Let's move. Let's go to. You want to talk about the world now? Yeah. You want to talk about? We got shit going down.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving's covered. Everyone's defooing their family. Well, and now we're gonna stop World War III. So this
is a point, though. I don't think necessarily corporal punishment might be the answer, but this point gets made in a lot of circles when talking about dueling, and that we need to bring back dueling. Like that's a meme that gets thrown around a lot, and that we used to be a society that was where dueling, where if you really were talking shit about somebody, you'd challenge them to pistols at dawn, see if you really hate each other, see if you're going to shoot each other in the face or shoot the sky, and then have that issue be buried in the ground forever from then on. And, it was a society with more bar fights and a society where the violence
All right. That's an amazing point. And I had never thought of this, but it's totally brilliant. And I'm going to bring it home. And this is where Marxism and anarchism, when they come together, are so beautiful. It takes your breath away. Dueling. You're right. We should bring it back. Absolutely. The custom up until the 19th century, through the 18th century, people, were dueling, shooting each other in the fucking face and killing each other, if they were successful. But that's what the object was to kill dude with your pistol. But think about it. You went on to, you started talking about bar fights and stuff. Nah, dude. I know of, maybe this happened, but I've literally never heard of this. Working class people dueling in that way. It's an entirely elite phenomenon.
Yeah.
We in America, we know about Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. In Europe, same thing. Wait, no, this is great, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a class analysis, you can immediately see it as this bizarre manifestation of elite behavior that ends up killing each other, which, fine. Not that I'm for that, but I don't care. It's fine. So long as they're not killing us, right? But that's good. To settle conflicts, intra-elite conflicts that way, instead of going to war and slaughtering millions, I'll take it. Brilliant move. That's the Marxism meets anarchism right there. Yes, let's bring back dueling and let's encourage it. And this is why, who said this? Somebody said this, but the fights among the elites, we want to encourage them to be as vicious as possible. Actually, not just to cause sort of chaos and disruption among the ruling class, which I guess is good, although it might not be good, but to get them to kill each other instead of us. Which, I'm not saying that's going to resolve all the world's conflicts, but in general, wouldn't we rather them fighting each other than us? Yes, we want them competing and also, if you want to settle the Ukraine, whether to fund Ukraine, yeah, let's have it out. Let's do a shooting match between Lindsey Graham and Tom Massey. Right there. I think I know Tom would win. Because he's a big gun dude from Kentucky. Anyway, I mean, no, of course that's sort of silly in a way, but yeah, no, it's also there's a massively important historical point here, which is that dueling was in fact the way that many elites in Europe and the United States settled conflicts. And that ended in the 19th century. What began in the 19th century, not war, of course there were wars before the 19th century. What began in the 19th century was industrial mass war, conscription, machine guns, infantry, trenches, and then of course new technology very soon in the later 19th century that killed lots of them at once. So we had mass industrial warfare that replaced dueling among the elites. And many more people, of course, many people died before the 19th century in war. I know this, of course, but far fewer, far fewer, regardless of what Stephen Idiot Pinker will tell you and what Stefan Molyneux will suggest. No, it's the 20th century was by far the most violent century in human history. And that's largely because of people who considered themselves to be progressives.
And you get people like Churchill and FDR who really never fought and treated the whole world as if it was like a game of Risk.
They do. And I say they do in the present tense because I am thinking, of course, again, about many people, some of whom I know, but, media pundits who see the world the same way, and they are in favor of the United States killing lots and lots of Russians and Arabs to secure what they consider to be a good and just and stable world order.
Oh, and also these people are
Remarkable.
so sheltered. People are so sheltered,
right,
in every single way that it's like the martial arts thing where the people who actually train martial arts are probably going to be the kindest to you in an actual fight, as opposed to the person who Yeah, it's never trained. Like,
oh my God.
yeah.
When I started sort of hanging out with fighters, that was the first thing I noticed. Was like, you were the scariest guy in the world when I saw you on TV, but in person, they're just like, they are the most relaxed, chill people.
Yeah.
Probably in part because they're exercising a lot, but also because, of course, they get their aggression out in the ring.
Yeah. And they had the forethought to like, I'm going to go train. So if my uncle goes crazy at Thanksgiving, I can restrain him and not hurt him.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Imagine having sort of masculine, violent, aggressive energy, which I think most boys and men do have. We just contain it or sublimate it or whatever. But we have that in us in some ways. Women do too, but certainly men do. Imagine that. Imagine having that, and imagine having a considerable amount of that. And if you've ever been a boy, you know what I'm talking about. How many times have we all fantasized about killing people? Okay, right? Imagine having that sort of inner id that Freud talked about, whatever you want to call it, but spending your entire life, which is true for people your age, many of them, on a computer screen, only talking about violence. The ability to go from that to quickly saying, well, of course we should launch hypersonic missiles into Moscow. Binary thinking. Russia's bad. We should do that. Yeah, I mean, it becomes, and Randolph Bourne talked about this in Twilight of the Idols in his great essays in the 1917-18 period when he was debating John Dewey about World War I and about the progressive intellectuals who were so rational and scientific in their thinking and so brilliant and intelligent and learned, who were all of them lining up for the war because it matched their binary thinking, linear thinking, their desire for a perfectly ordered society. They thought that going to war would create, in large part, they were right, like a socially engineered society that would work perfectly efficiently, etc. Yeah, I see a lot of these people now cheering on the war against Russia and the war against, it's not just, I was going to say Hamas, but now it's against, and well, this is a good segue into the ceasefire in Lebanon. The war against, what is it? I don't know, Iran plus Hamas plus Hezbollah plus Assad. I mean, what, the Arab world, basically, or the Shia soon? I don't know. Half the Arab world. I mean, those people, and I have many major media pundits. Destiny is just one good example. There are many of them, and I know people listening to this will know who I'm talking about, who have that kind of thing. Douglas Murray's another one, who have never lifted a finger against anybody, but sit all day long in front of their computer screens, thinking about, reading about, watching violence, and not just violence, not just hitting your friend in the face, mass violence, killing, and not killing one or two or five people, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people in these wars. So I'm thinking right now of many, I guess I won't name names, but anyway, there are many pundits right now who, now that it's clear that the Ukraine war has been won by Russia in that they are never going to give up the Donbass region or Crimea, they're never going to give up the territory that they seized, are trying to come up with some intellectual way to say that Russia's actually lost the war. And what they all say is, well, Russia lost this war because they lost, maybe, we don't know this, but something like 50,000 people, men, soldiers were killed. We don't know. So certainly in the tens of thousands. I mean, no one doubts that. Significant number. And that's what they wanted, because to them that therefore weakens the Russian military, or at least sends a message to Putin and the Russian military that such losses will be incurred if you ever try anything like this again. And they're happy about it. They're satisfied. They sort of sit back in their chairs and they think about the 50,000 Russians and they think, yeah, that's what we wanted. That's what we wanted when we called for the United States to send billions and billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. And I heard them say this at the time, even before 2022. But certainly in 2022, when the U.S. started pumping weapons and money into Ukraine, many of them simply said, And Lloyd Austin even said this as Secretary of Defense when he was in Ukraine. He said, the objective here is to degrade, is the word they would use, the Russian military by, yes, blowing up their tanks, but killing their men. The objective became primarily, and I mean this primarily because they knew they couldn't actually win the war. They knew that Ukraine couldn't ever drive Russia out entirely. The objective had to be to degrade the Russian military. So in the minds of these people who have been cheerleading the Ukraine war since 2022, their objective has been met. Russia controls eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine. Okay. To them, that's insignificant compared to the major victory, which is 50,000 graves in Russia. That is the kind of thinking, the kind of calculation one makes only if one is a sociopath in some part of their mind. And I think maybe that's in part because they're intellectuals who, as I said, have probably, I assume, the aggressive feelings that many of us have, the aggressive, violent feelings and fantasies, but they sit behind a keyboard all day and can't do anything about it and never have done anything about it, and they don't do martial arts. They don't play tackle football. They might run in marathons. That's the kind of thing those people will do. But real violence, they've never, ever experienced, even one-on-one. And of course, hitting your child, oh my God, I'm sure the Crystal family and the Kagan family and the Victoria Nuland family and the Jake Sullivan family and the Tony Blinken family, what do you think corporal punishment of children is considered in their homes, right? Oh my God, that's a horrific person who hits their child to discipline them. Meanwhile, they're just pressing buttons. Boof, boof. Hundreds dead here, hundreds dead there, hundreds dead over here. It's the progressive, intellectual, scientific, social engineering mind at work. And you see it especially in the State Department, the Defense Department, and in the White House. But you also see it among their supporters in the media class, the pundits who are calling for more war with Ukraine and more war with the Arab world to defend Israel. It's very easy, and I'm sure satisfying. This is what's scary. I think it's satisfying for those people to call for the deaths of thousands or millions and then get it from their government. Imagine how good that would feel. You know what? It's February 2022. We should bomb the shit out of Russia. We should kill as many Russians as we can. So we should send all these missiles and artillery pieces and shells and everything to Ukraine because we got to kill some Russians. And then 2 years later, you find out 50,000 of those fuckers, we got them. And you can see it and you can hear it in the tones of their voices. And because they lost the war, but they won what they have a hatred of Russia, which is the most bizarre thing in the world. It is only held by a microscopic fraction of the American people. How many Americans do you know who hate Russians that much? I have not even met anybody, well, I should say, except for in the media class, but there are those who run foreign policy in our country, and the people in the media who support them have, for whatever reason, this obsessive, irrational hatred of Russians and actually want to kill them, and have actually succeeded in doing so. Now, they also succeeded in killing 400,000 of their beloved Ukrainians to do the killing of the 50,000 Russians. But again, in the calculus of the mind of the violent, aggressive person who's never been able to express it in real life, that's cool. That's victory. 450,000 good people to kill 50,000 evil people. Of course, many of the Russians were conscripts. Or if they fought with the Wagner force, they came out of prisons. And the only reason they fought for the Wagner force in Bakhmut and all these hellholes was so that they could get out of prison. That was actually the deal that Prigozhin gave them. He went into prisons, gave a speech to the prisoners, and said, you can either live in this Russian dungeon for the rest of your life, or you can come fight for us to liberate a town in Ukraine. And you have a 50% chance of dying. But he got 5,000 or 10,000. I think Wagner was like 10,000 at one point. Guys to do that. They were overwhelmingly convicts. Okay. So that's who you're killing. And actual, real, just regular conscripts, just regular 20-year-old Russian guys who would probably be tech workers, except they get drafted like people do all around the world. This is nothing special in Russia. We've all had conscription, every country. That's who you're killing. Congratulations. 50,000 of those Russian guys are dead. Putin's not dead. The Minister of Defense is not dead. The guys who have run the war are not dead. 400,000+ Ukrainians are dead, and you're considering this a victory. Not to mention the fact that, 95% of the Ukrainians were also conscripts. And there is nothing other than slavery than what conscription is. That is what it is. Those were slaves, and the worst kinds of slaves. So you killed a bunch of slaves, and you consider this a victory, while Russia nonetheless still controls eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine as well. You killed a bunch of slaves on both sides, and this is a victory? And we're sending $24 billion more? Joe Biden is asking for this. This is the latest news, and we are now segueing to news. Joe Biden has now requested Congress to appropriate $24 billion more for Ukraine. And why is he doing this? To subvert democracy. So that Trump will be saddled with an even more entrenched war. A Ukrainian government that has even more American money and more American weapons, and is even more, $24 billion more dug in. It'll be that much harder for Trump to extricate. I think he still can, but what Biden is doing, I mean, just think about the cynicism. Stealing my money, your money, Americans' money, not in insignificant numbers, stealing our money, because I never told them to use this money. You didn't tell them to use this money. Stealing our money, tax money, giving it to a country that has lost a war that will result in the killing of many, many thousands of people on both sides, and will result in nothing of consequence. It's like World War I again. It's like 1914 to 1919. Look at the world map. It's just like the borders just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and they ended up at the same place, essentially, except Germany got destroyed. And millions and millions of people died. Nothing good came out of it, and everyone agrees on that now. And that's where we are. That's the thinking of Joe Biden right now in regards to both the Ukraine war and the war in Israel. Just keep sending bombs and guns and money to keep killing, even though, of course, the Palestinians are not going anywhere and Russia's not going anywhere. It is the mind, the product of a mind or minds that are really rare, so strange. Again, I have known hardly anybody who thinks that way, but those who do think that way end up in the State Department, running the world. And there we have it. I don't know. It's nothing new. I mean, this has been going on for a couple centuries now. Modern statecraft, nationalism, and warfare, and modern technology, that lovely little combination of things, has resulted in hundreds of millions being killed. And still, we thought war was over a few years ago. Remember that? Before 2022, everybody was saying, oh my God, we're done with war. We're just going to have like drone attacks here and there. Mm-hmm. That's how we're going to settle conflict. And then Ukraine happened, and then Israel happened. And I mean, it's just been a renewal of the bloodbaths of the 20th century. Almost exactly. Ukraine is a continuation of World War II and the Cold War. And Israel and Palestine is a continuation of Israel and Palestine in the 20th century. I mean, it's just, and the colonial wars, I should say. It's a continuation of the most violent colonial wars. I mean, this is like Congo and Algeria again. We just never finished. Israel was the last in and the last out of the colonial race for the brown world. They were the last to try it, to colonize a brown place, and they are going to be the last to get their asses kicked out. But they are also going to be the most tenacious, apparently, and they're going to kill a lot of people on the way out, maybe more than the Belgians, even under Leopold in the Congo, which would be quite a feat. So, there. Mm-hmm. Say something. Say something. I don't know. Anything, because it's always good.
I was going to say, I was looking for articles, how you're starting to hear that maybe a nuclear war can be winnable.
Right.
Yeah. That's the word being floated around right now.
Right.
Not so much. I don't hear that, actually. I think Alex Jones is a little bit of a Chicken Little on that one. And whenever I've heard Joe Biden, he speaks with like this absolute certainty that Russia, under no circumstances, no matter what we do to them, will ever launch a nuke. He seems determined to test that in his last couple months. Do you see Russia? Well, okay, so this happened last week. The United States emptied the embassy at Kiev, and seems to basically think that Russia is going to retaliate in a major way by, I don't know, wiping out that city or something as the war escalates. Do you see it breaking out like that?
No, I mean, so it's interesting. The brinksmanship, which is a very important term in international relations. It's one you learn in like IR 101. The idea of mounting forces and issuing aggressive, belligerent proclamations and threatening war against your rivals or enemies in order to force them to stand down or to intimidate them into standing down, etc. I think it might be right in this case. I think that, yeah, that's probably right, that Russia will never use their nukes against the United States, at least not under Putin. I mean, not in the foreseeable future. And you will notice that every one of the smartest of the anti-Russia pundits and politicians, pro-Ukraine people, they'll all say this right up front. They'll say, "Oh, you're worried about World War III? Come on now. He's never going to do that. He knows he'll get annihilated if he tries anything. And therefore, we should be able to launch missiles into Russia all we want." That's exactly the argument about the hypersonic missile attacks into Russia. The ATACMS missiles, American-made missiles being shot into Russia as we speak. I mean, unbelievable. And yes, and it's been going on for what, a week now?
Yeah.
And I'm still here. You're still. I don't see a mushroom cloud over Indiana, except for what Ohio State did to you. Yeah, no, Putin hasn't dropped a single nuke on anybody. Not on Ukraine, not on Europe, not on us. In response to American not hypersonic missiles, sorry. And by the way, a couple of listeners or viewers corrected me on the specifics, the technical, the specs of the ATACMS missiles. The range is only like 100 something miles, whatever. And anyway, they're not hypersonic, but they're very fast. Anyway, yeah, big missiles being shot into Russia that are made by America and supplied by America. I think they're made in St. Louis. And Russia has not. Can you imagine if if Mexico was in alliance with China and was shooting missiles into the United States that were made by China?
What Alex Jones is arguing is that World War III has already begun.
Yeah, it has.
We have NATO countries attacking Russia on sovereign soil, and you have the alliances in place, you have international collaboration. This is a world war that we are currently in now, and we're just in the early stages, but by international law standards, that's a world war.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, is Ukraine not acting on behalf of the United States in doing this? Of course it is. Yeah, it's acting on behalf of itself, at least on behalf of its government. But of course it is. We want them to do this, and we know this. It's not just the pundits who are saying these things about killing lots of Russians being a victory. It's also the Secretary of Defense who has said it. And, in less guarded moments, U.S. government officials have said such things about degrading the Russian military, which, again, tanks can be replaced easily and with no loss in morale. But if you kill lots of Russians, the theory goes, they will not want to fight in wars ever again, and will not be aggressive against the West, and will do what we say and be compliant. Russian resilience against mass casualties cannot be. They are the world champions of sustaining mass death in war and continuing to fight. There is no one even close to the Russians. So I don't know. They could be different now. Russian culture, like all cultures, can change over time and does change over time. And maybe Russians are less willing to fight in wars. Probably true to some extent, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think the Russian capacity to suffer is still there. I think that's still very much a part of them.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever,
Well, I mean, the 90s. You don't have to go back that far. You don't have to go back to Stalin. You don't have to go back to World War II. Just go back to the 90s and the starvation they were enduring then. Yeah, that's
right. Even people who are under 40 remember well experiences that no one in the United States has ever gone through. No one in the West even has ever gone through what Russians went through in the 90s. Serious privation, serious consequences to a revolution. Serious privation. So yeah, I just want to keep pointing out the ways that people think about foreign policy and international relations. And especially, of course, the experts and the statesmen who carry out the foreign policy. I just want to I want everyone to step back whenever you hear about some major event in foreign policy. Just step back for a second and just think about the way they're thinking about this. And I promise you, having studied these people for most of my life and having studied pretty much all the major foreign policy thinkers in American history, they are all would be considered, if they were on a psychiatrist's couch, some form of sociopath, and some of them are psychopaths. And I'm not saying that glibly. I really mean that. They simply have far less regard for human life than the rest of us. These are people who just simply value human life way, way less and are much more comfortable with having others killed in the service of some political aim than, thank God, the 99+% of us. It's a very weird little subset of the population that ends up controlling the government. And that's what you see on display right now, because there's no other way to explain the Ukraine war and the war against Palestine right now. There's a level of sociopathy that you just don't see among ordinary people, I don't think.
Another note on that, the so-called experts in the United States, if you juxtapose them with the experts in Russia, as far as like actual intelligence, you can tell, like, I know we keep using Dugan as an example, but you can tell when you listen to Dugan that he's read Emerson and Thoreau in English. And I defy you to find anybody from the United States speaking on the Ukrainian war who has read Pushkin or Dostoevsky in the original Russian.
That actually has changed. It's interesting. The American empire really is less intelligent than it used to be.
Yeah.
And the guys on the Duran, Alexander Mercouris and Alex Cristoforo talk about this a lot, because Mercouris is older than me. He's in his 60s, and he was around, and his parents or his family is all Greek political elites. So he was around this stuff. Like, he constantly talks about how diplomats, American diplomats to Russia and elsewhere, but especially to Russia, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s spoke Russian. They often had PhDs in Russian history. They loved Russian culture, actually. They weren't just ambassadors to Russia, but they were there because they were rich guys. That's what ambassadors usually are. But they were people who actually loved Russian culture. They would go to the ballet and they would read Pushkin and Tolstoy and were fans of that. And, and there's a lot of people, and there's a lot in Russian culture to love, by the way, and that's who they were. But they really knew Russian culture and history and all of it, the Russian language. They spoke Russian. They didn't need translators when they were in the Kremlin. And now that's not the case. Also, they would socialize and have actual diplomacy with their Soviet counterparts. They would have parties together and go out to dinner, and they knew each other by their first names and were friendly with each other's wives and all that stuff. And sure, I get it. Two governments, they're officials, and who cares what they do? No, that does matter a lot. I'd much rather, and notice we didn't go to war with them. In fact, there was less war against Russia during the Cold War, direct war, than there is now. And it's less scary, except for maybe the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was just a moment, and I'm not even sure it was that scary. But we were never on the brink, like we have been for more than 2 years now, 3 years. Not like this, and certainly not for this long. This is just, and the thing that's really scary, I don't really see a resolution to either war. I don't see a resolution that doesn't involve the killing of millions. I don't. Does anyone see an end to a resolution to the Israel-Palestine war that doesn't involve the killing of millions? Does anyone see a resolution to the West versus Russia war that doesn't involve the killing of a resolution where both sides are done and we're no longer fighting and there's no longer hostilities? I don't. So long as the ideology of Zionism remains the animating principle for Israelis and the American elite, and so long as the idea of a global Pax Americana and an American-controlled Europe remains the animating ideology of the Western and American elites, it's about those ideologies. The attachment among the Western elites to Zionism, and especially American globalism, it's that. Once the elites in this country give those up, detach themselves from those commitments, then we're in a different world, and then it's resolved. And then, I'm not saying there will no longer be wars, but those particular global epic wars will be over. But I don't see a resolution until the American elites give up on those ideas that the United States should dominate the world and that there should be a Jewish ethno-state in the Middle East, which is also our military outpost there. It's those commitments that, to me, is the cause of all this stuff. And once it is about the people in the media. It is about the people on YouTube and Twitter. It is. When those people change their minds about those things, then we will have some kind of semblance of world peace, at least in those places. Now, what will get those people to change their minds about Zionism and NATO? Well, I don't see anything except for military defeat. They have to be militarily defeated, or at least their sides have to be militarily defeated in the field for them to change their minds. Which you see now with Ukraine, by the way. Now you see a lot of the pro-Ukraine people talking very differently because they've been defeated militarily by Russia in the field. And I hate that. I'm not pro-Russia and I'm not pro-Hamas. Like, I don't want any military defeat of anybody. That means the killings of lots and lots of civilians. But that I just don't, because these people will not detach themselves from those ideological constructs. And it's amazing that they are that committed, that they're willing to kill millions to achieve them in places they'll probably never even visit. They may never even go to Gaza or Russia, but they're so committed they want to devote troops, bodies, millions and trillions of dollars and guns and tanks and bombs and aircraft carriers to these things that they'll never even see, but result in the deaths of all these people. They have to give up those attachments. And I don't see any other way than what the Viet Cong did to the United States in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s. They defeated the United States in the field militarily by killing lots of our soldiers. And that's what convinced the New York Times and CBS and then Congress and the Senate and then the president to finally withdraw. The United States had to be defeated militarily in the field for that war to end. And I don't see, and I'm so sorry to say this, and it makes me want to cry, but I don't see any way to end these wars in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe in any other way than a military defeat of America's proxy forces, Israel and Ukraine, which would mean
that happens overnight. That happens
so many
overnight
people.
if we stop funding them. That happens overnight.
Right. Well, that requires the American elite to give up these attachments.
Yeah.
That's all I'm telling it really comes down to, I don't know, a few thousand people. It's a few thousand people who went to Columbia and Harvard and Stanford, who live in Washington, D.C., New York City, and Boston and San Francisco. I mean, I'm completely serious. It's a couple thousand people who can determine foreign policy and therefore run the world, really. The largest contours of world politics is controlled by those people. And they are attached to Israel and NATO. And they got to so really, honestly, we should be focusing all of our energies on those people who are in America. You don't have to go to Europe. You don't have to go to Israel. Right here. They're right here. The people who run the world and they run the world over there live here. They live in DC. And they have this incredibly weird ideological attachment, religious, one might say, attachment to those two causes, which is resulting in, us being on the brink of World War III. So anyway.
Do you have any credence to the ceasefire in Hezbollah that started today?
Right.
The 60-day. No.
Yeah. So, I mean, they just announced it, right? Was it just today or just?
Well, today's the first official day, but yeah, yesterday. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay. So for those who don't know, the deal, as I understand it, is that, so the Litani River runs through southern Lebanon. And if you look at Lebanon, I don't know, it's like, I don't know how many, 10, 20, 30 miles below the Litani River, between the Litani River and the Israeli border. And that's always been, Israel has basically stated from the beginning that they want to control everything up to the Litani River to serve as sort of a buffer zone between them and Hezbollah or whoever lives in Lebanon. Anyway, the ceasefire deal today that was announced is that I think over a 60-day period, it's a gradual withdrawal. Over a gradual withdrawal of Hezbollah forces to move north of the Litani River, and for Israel, the IDF to leave that area, and then for the Lebanese army, which is different than Hezbollah, to then occupy southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River, and serve as, again, some sort of buffer force between Hezbollah and the IDF. I think there's some other terms to this, but that's the basic deal. You know, we've seen this many times before. Hezbollah, but more importantly, the animus against Israel within Lebanon is not going away. Yes, there are significant, roughly a third of Lebanon is Christian, and among Lebanese Christians, there is a significant pro-Israel faction. They're not even close to a majority. They're not even a plurality, but it's significant. And those are the people who were part of the phalangists, among the phalangists in the 80s and 90s in the Lebanese Civil War, who did the nastiest work for Israel. These are, again, Christians who, you know, for a lot of justified reasons, didn't want Muslims taking over their country. They didn't like the PLO coming into Lebanon, which the PLO had done at that point, but who then carried out 5 massacres, I think, in the Lebanese Civil War that resulted, massacres of like dozens or more of people, often in refugee camps, civilians, many of them. And so they're not going away, but you know, there's also a third of the country is Shia and a third of the country is Sunni, roughly. The government is divided between the three. So the Christians and the Sunnis and the Shia each get representatives in the government. None of that's changed. A bunch of the Hezbollah leadership has been killed. And in fact, the guy they replaced Nasrallah with was also just assassinated, I think, last week by Israel. That's their main strategy, which tells you a lot about sort of the hopelessness of Zionism, right? For decades, that's what they've been doing. The first thing they'll do is assassinate the leader of the opposition, or try to. It just tells you how futile the whole project is long run. But the Hezbollah forces, the rank and file, and especially their support among the Shia, particularly the Lebanese Shia, which is about a third of the population, and even portions of the Sunni population, because Hamas is Sunni, but the Shia, for sure, roughly a third of Lebanon is pretty squarely behind Hezbollah and receives direct social services from them. Hezbollah has basically a welfare state that they're operating in southern Lebanon. Smart, but that's so it's just a temporary thing. I hope it sticks, but all you're doing then is just delaying the inevitable, which is Zionism finally coming to its end because it's been militarily defeated. And I'm just really sad and terrified and scared about what that means. For Israelis, and I have friends in Israel and like really good people who live in Israel. And it's just a question of when there's going to be a war in which either they leave or they're going to die. And in the meantime, all the people around Israel are going to die in this war that I don't see stopping. I don't see stopping at all. Trump, of course, is hyper-Zionist. His appointees are hyper-Zionist. Even the good ones, even Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., the really cool radical ones on other things, they're hyper-Zionists.
Well, real quick, we should mention Sebastian Gorka was announced as Director of National Security.
I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Wait, what's that? Direct? You mean Homeland Security? No.
Yeah, Director of National. Director of National Security Policy in the White House. So I think just advisor in the
White House advisor. Yeah. White House advisor. Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
At least he doesn't have like policy power. But
yeah. No, he's not like ahead of a bureaucracy or anything.
So that guy is a vicious and idiot. I mean, he is what liberals think Trump is. Sebastian Gorka really is that. A bit fascistic, authoritarian, and really stupid.
Well,
so
Max Blumenthal called it a continuation of Biden foreign policy within Trump world. That
sure.
Gorka is like legitimately that voice, and has ties to British intelligence, and is the anti-Russia radical within MAGA world.
Right. Yeah, foreign policy is looking terrible so far. It's just terrible, and Trump people, I've just been hearing nonstop.
Well,
dissimulation about it. Oh, well, it's not. He's not really going to do these things. He's not really going to deport 20 million Mexicans, and he's not really going to kill all the people in Gaza, and he's not really going to continue the war in Ukraine. Okay.
Lighter note: Jay Bhattacharya, director of NIH, National Institute of Health. You've got a legit COVID skeptic taking over the bureaucracy that instituted COVID policy nationally. So
this is where Trump is radical.
Yeah.
Jay Bhattacharya was probably the most famous COVID skeptic, more than a COVID skeptic. I mean, he was an outright opponent of the lockdowns, the masking, the vaccines, all of it. He was from the beginning
the scientific authority that Ron DeSantis used to keep Florida open.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Stanford professor. Yeah. We'll see. That's exciting to some extent, but I don't, there's the potential for sellout. Number one, when anyone gets institutionalized, meaning that when anyone gains actual institutional power, what usually follows is them selling out. We'll see. The other question is, what is Jay Bhattacharya really all about? I don't know. Like, I agreed with him on those 3 issues.
Which is like complete common sense for any doctor before 2020. Right. Like, every doctor before 2020 and after agrees with him. He just happened to be brave enough to be right in the middle of a crisis.
Right. Yeah. Masks don't work. The vaccine, an experimental vaccine, is dangerous to deploy, what was it, a month after it was, or 2 months after it was invented or something. And lockdowns are catastrophic and have no social, have no redeeming value. Yeah, 100% agree with you, Jay, on all those things. But like, that's again, like, who now, especially, who looks at those 3 and thinks otherwise? Not many of us. So I also I hate to say this, but I just don't, once he got sort of, he's like a doctor. He's not a political guy. And once he got thrust into the political spotlight, I don't think he's really built for that. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy. And I don't think his intelligence is really suited. His kind of intelligence is suited for the political world. So I think he's going to get pushed around and intimidated, and I am scared for him. So I don't know. I'm not, but then again, sure. I love the, we need to get to the bottom of Wuhan. We haven't talked about that in a long time. The lab leak theory. Well, and he could do that.
Yeah. And
he really could do that. Wow.
Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was raising the alarm bells about biolabs in Ukraine.
And RFK, I think. RFK was good on this too, right? Wasn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Is he good on Wuhan? I don't even know.
Well, biolab.
Biolabs, yeah, right, exactly. If those 3 can give me that, if they can get to the bottom of the biolab, the biological weapons research program run by the United States over the last 30 years, which I've been researching, by the way, recently a lot. If they can get to the bottom of that, like the Ukrainian bioweapons labs, the collaboration with the Chinese government in Wuhan and elsewhere to develop viruses, and let's finally get to the bottom of whether this was a leak or an accident, in that which most of us think in our world think has happened. We can get, now is true with Bhattacharya and Tulsi and RFK. We can really get to the bottom of that. And that could be revolutionary. That could be revolutionary.
We have the memory of a goldfish here, but Putin in 2022 put the biolabs in Ukraine up there with denazification, up there with NATO involvement in Ukraine as one of the reasons why he felt it was important for Russia's national security to contain Ukraine and to invade them. We have these biolabs weapons after a major biological weapons labs in the middle of a neighboring country after a giant pandemic that just came out of the same circumstances.
20 of them.
Yeah.
20. I believe there's something like 20 bioweapons labs funded by the United States that are inside Ukraine currently. Currently. And we also know that Hunter Biden was part of that project, and he was involved in, his company was involved in developing bioweapons in those labs. You know, and again, I think we can actually get to the bottom of those issues, which, you know, a year ago I was all hot for. And I still am. I think it's extremely important. I just, at the cost of everything else that Trump is bringing, I don't know. It's not, I don't want that deal. I'd rather stop the wars first, than especially in Palestine. It's an open bleeding wound for now 14 months. And I just want it to end. And I hope he will. I don't think he will. I don't know. Or he will at the cost of many, many thousands of Palestinian lives. I mean, that's my guess, is that he's going to do some sort of deal with Netanyahu that involves like a major rapid escalation short term, and then will be followed by some kind of deal that will bring a ceasefire. But I think they're going to kill a bunch more people in sort of a last orgy of violence before they force a concession and a ceasefire. That's my fear. And I think that's where it's headed. The people he has appointed, as I said, every single one of them is a hyper Zionist. I mean, holy shit. I mean, Huckabee, the ambassador. I mean, not that he has policy power, but he certainly represents Trump's thinking and Trump's cabinet thinking on Israel. I mean, they're ready to wipe out everybody. And so I think like some massive bombing raid, would be just fine with Trump, to force a final concession from Hamas and a final ceasefire deal. Because if they just really went off even more than they have, I mean, and truly just leveled, all of the South, yeah, I would imagine Hamas would be forced to surrender, or at least give up to some extent. But it's going to be that kind of thing. I think it's going to be just horrific. It'll be like Mosul and Raqqa, but this time we'll see it. That's what Trump did. That's how he routed ISIS. That's how he defeated ISIS, was just a complete, total war of annihilation in those two cities. But we didn't see it. The media never got in there. We didn't have, for whatever reason, we don't have cell phone footage of those immense wars. But I think that's what Trump's going to go for. I'm worried about, because he saw it being successful against ISIS. So why not against Hamas? Yeah. It's Jesus, man. I don't know. It's going to be bad. I fear. Maybe not, but I fear it's going to be really bad. What do you think? What do you think he's going to do on Israel?
He's going to solve it. He's going to make the world peaceful again. Everything's going to be great.
He's going to make a deal?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not going to criticize him at least until like 6 months in, but
okay,
give him a chance. Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. We can hope.
Yeah. Unregisteredacademy.com. The Black Friday sale, is that going to be up?
It will be on Friday. Yeah. There's going to be some cool stuff. We're going to have a pretty amazing trailers coming out for the courses, and there will be a Black Friday sale on Friday, and you should definitely check that out. So go to unregisteredacademy.com, but do it on Friday morning.
Yeah. Well,
we're not. Yeah.
I mean, this is the video that thousands of people are going to see right before then. So we got to tell them to go there. And
for sure.
Yeah. And this is your chance to, I mean, whatever it's going to be. I don't know if you've decided yet what the discount's going to be, but this is the time to get in, and you'll be most likely with our system grandfathered in at a low price. So this is the time to buy your annual membership to the Academy.
A considerable percentage of our students are Black Friday members. Yeah, got their deals on Black Friday. So yes, it's a great deal. And we have so many courses, and there's so many more coming out. It's an even better deal now. So definitely check it out.
Yep.
Black Friday sale.
Nietzsche, fascism.
Can't beat it.
Oh, the new
World War II.
World War II.
Israel, Palestine.
Yeah. Israel, Palestine.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4 on the Ukraine war. 3 or 4. Yeah.
Exactly.
Everything.
We got you covered. Check it out. Black Friday sale at unregisteredacademy.com. And then if you want to hang out with us after Unreported every Thursday night, go to patreon.com/unregistered. Become a member or a patron of Unregistered and Unreported. And you can hang out with us at Unregistered Live, which is after Unreported every Wednesday night. I'll get this eventually. It's a great, awesome Zoom meeting. We hang out, have a meeting, have a hangout, maybe smoke drugs, do things like that, and get loose. So join us, become a patron, and check out the UA Black Friday sale on Friday.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and fight your family this weekend.
No, just get rid of them.
Get rid of them. Okay.
Get rid of them and join us. We're way better. Choose your family, and your family is us. Your real family is us.
Your real family. Yeah.
No, it's true. It's true. Mm-hmm. I can show you a lot of people who tell you that. Okay, man. Thank you.
Peace.
Awesome. All the good. Peace to everybody.